What is going on? It is Andrew and
AJ
with the Emerald Group right here on the beautiful, sunny panhandle of Florida. We service everything from Pensacola to Panama City Beach and everything in between. We are a real estate company. I'm going to try to get through this quick because we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. But AJ, what else should they do?
What? Oh, well, you should also hit the subscribe button and ding the bell so that you get notified every time we do another video.
Oh, you're doing it fast too. That's great. We're getting calls, texts, and emails pretty consistently. People like wanting to move to our area. If that sounds like you, then go ahead and give us a call. All of our information is on the screen. But let's jump right into it. Let's start with houses, and then we can kind of move on to something that's specific to our area, which are condos and short-term rentals. But right now I want to definitely hit on houses because it is the most popular thing purchased for investment purposes.
For me, when I'm looking at different houses to buy for investment purposes, some of the things that I look at are HOAs, location, and the size and price compared to the other properties in the area. So when I say HOAs, I mean anyone that already says, hey, we're not going to allow any short-term rentals in here, because whether I want to short-term rent my property out or I want to long-term rent it out around the 12-month mark, I don't want somebody else telling me whether I can or can't. Like, it's an investment. Don't tell me what I can do with my money. So I'm going to try to avoid HOAs at all costs. Even if right now they're like, yeah, short-term rentals are okay, they could change their minds later on depending on who gets onto that board. And I just don't want to deal with it. I like everything to go as efficiently as possible. I don't have a lot of time. I don't have a lot of emotional space in my head to deal with that type of change for a large investment. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't want to deal with it when we're talking about houses. So I'm going to avoid HOAs as much as I possibly can. I'm also going to avoid any place that isn't pretty well populated. So if it's out in the middle of nowhere, like we're talking about a house with like 5 acres, no freaking way. No freaking way. It's going to be so hard to find an audience to actually want to rent that property out. I have zero desire to try to deal with that. I'm going to find a place that is close to the popular areas in my area. So for us specifically, I'm going to be looking for places that are next to the military bases, close to a lot of working areas, the industrial type areas, any place where people can commute back and forth to work, back and forth to their children's schools, what have you, as fast as possible. I'm going to avoid anything that's like out of the way. If there's only one stoplight there, I'm not going to buy there for an investment. And then lastly, I'm not going to buy the most expensive or the biggest house in a neighborhood, because if it's significantly bigger or it's so different from anything else, it's going to be hard to comp. And I don't want to deal with that as an issue whenever I go to sell later on, because ultimately, I'm trying to build this equity, build the equity, build the equity, build the equity, and then have all of that right there for me to use to invest in something else later on, or to just pull it out, whenever I'm ready to retire and I don't want to deal with renting it out anymore. So I'm going to avoid the one that looks completely different from anything around it. Maybe all the houses around it are 3-bedroom, 2 bathrooms, but this one's a 5-bedroom, 3-bath. I'm probably not going to go for that one. I'm not going to go for the one that's like 1,000 square feet more than all the other properties in the neighborhood.
One of the things that I do when choosing locations for my properties that I'm going to be renting out is, this is going to sound a little bit nerdy, but I basically draw a Venn diagram. I'm going to draw a circle around where I work and then where I live. And I'm only going to purchase where those two circles collide, right? I only want to be inside of that little window for the most part, right? And if that's a pretty small area and you live 8 miles away from your work, then, maybe open up those circles a little bit. But I like to draw a 10-mile radius around both. And the reason being is, at any point, if something happens, I do not want it to take more than 15 to 20 minutes to get to that property. This is something that I learned because I currently have a property here in our area that's about a 30-minute drive away. And I had a little bit of an issue and I had to get up there right away. And it took me a little bit longer than I wanted. I don't want this to be a day ruiner if a pipe bursts in my property, or if the tenant says, hey, this tree looks like it's decrepit and falling. That was my exact situation. Hey, it's okay, it's decrepit, it's falling. Please get up here, look at it. We need to get somebody out here. I drove all the way up there. It was a 45-minute drive, completely took out my entire workday. But if it was just a few miles down the road, it wouldn't have been that cosmic. I could have done that on my lunch break. I'm a real estate professional, obviously, so I can kind of flex my schedule a little bit, but not everybody has that option. So when choosing a location, I definitely like to choose in between both of those so that I can get to the property very quickly.
What about condos? I talked a lot about houses, and the one that you were specifically talking about just now is a house. So, what about condos? What do you avoid when you're considering purchasing a condo for
So
rent?
condos are very interesting because one of the things that you brought up earlier, AJ, was HOAs. And with a condo, you're going to have a COA or an HOA, COA condo association, right? You're going to have something there. So what I look for is longevity, that they have allowed the type of rental that I would like, whether it's short-term or long-term. Here in our area, short-term rentals are very popular. We've got tens of thousands of them, right? It's a very popular vacation spot. So I want to make sure that that HOA didn't just let it open up, or maybe 3 years ago they shut it down for a while and everybody had to fight to get short-term rentals back in. Because if you're counting on that income, or even if you don't need the income but you want it because it's an investment, you're going to drop $300,000 on a condo, you want it to cash flow, right? And then all of a sudden the HOA, somebody gets in there and they say, no, we're not doing short term anymore. You can only do long term. You put a long term tenant in there, people fight it. And now all of a sudden you've got a long term tenant you've got to kick out after a year. You've lost a year of rentals. It's just not a good idea. So that's super important. Another thing that I like to look at are obviously the numbers, especially when you're looking at your short term rental numbers. As the market has adjusted, lately with COVID, the prices have exceeded the rentals. The rentals always lag behind a little bit. So 3 years ago, right before COVID, you could buy almost any appropriately priced condo that was in a short-term rental zone and make a 10% return per year on that condo. So you make an $800,000 purchase, you can expect to at least make $80,000 gross from that property. That's gross, not net, right? So I'm looking at that, and right now with the prices the way they are, those numbers aren't adding up anymore. That used to be a staple. Like I would tell people, do not buy this property. It doesn't have the history for it, or there's no comps that show it's making 10%. But now it's looking a little closer to 8% for most of our area. That's eventually going to even out, but that is what I'm going to look at because obviously the investment portion is super important. What else do you look for?
Condos specifically? For condos, I'm going to be looking at amenities because I know that with condos, I'm probably going to be considering short-term rentals. So I'm going to want something that has water view. If I have the opportunity to purchase water view, I'm going to avoid everything that isn't water view because anything that's 2-bedroom and above with a water view, those are the things that are going to sell out the fastest.
That's a really good point too. The bedrooms, especially on condos, is very good. So we call it heads and beds in the short-term rental industry. The more heads in beds that you can fit in the property, typically the better. Now, the 2-bedroom, 1-baths seem to have the most wear and tear for what's going to happen because you do have more people in it. And typically people that are buying a 3 and 4 or renting a 3 and 4 bedroom short-term condo are bigger families or multiple adult couples. You're not going to have as much wear and tear for whatever reason that is. So there's a little bit more wear and tear, but they do tend to cash flow a little bit better percentage-wise to their price is generally what I notice because it's the most common thing. You can have 2 adult couples that are taking a vacation together. You can have a family, even a five-person family with 2 bedrooms is perfectly all right, especially if there's bunks set up somewhere in a hallway or something like that. And then also going back to houses, I know we're kind of jumping off. That's also a very important thing to think of too. I know you mentioned the 5-bedroom home in a neighborhood of all 3 bedrooms, but one of the things that I do or that I did before I started purchasing rental properties is go, okay, cool. What's my avatar for my house look like? What's the type of people I want in here? Who am I going after? And for me, it was 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes, which is great, right? Like, I mean, it's good for me because that's what I wanted. But then sometimes I see a 3-bedroom, 1-bath home and I'm like, oh man, it's priced so much better. I really, really want to pick it up. And I do not have a single one of those for the exact reason that's not in part of my investment strategy because they're hard to sell, which is one thing. So I'm not going to earn as much. I will pay less for it. So maybe that evens out, but then they're also harder to rent. So all of these need to go into the equation.
So basically, always consider your audience whenever you're considering an investment property. Who do you want to rent it to? How many people do you want to rent it to at a time? How often do you want it to stay booked? And then get with your real estate professional to find out what are the units that rent the most frequently. What are the first ones to get taken off the market that are the hardest ones to get if you waited until last minute? If there's a certain one that is always available, that's the one you don't want.
Another thing when talking about the price point that you might be in, for those of you guys with a larger budget, maybe you're above 1 mil, above 3 mil, something like that. A lot of people that we have talked to don't understand that there are really good investments inside of that realm. In fact, a lot of times they exceed that 10% rule by a pretty healthy margin. I've got some clients turned friends of ours that bought a very expensive home on the water, and they make a ridiculous amount higher than that 10%. I mean, I don't want to give the number out, but it's really high up there. So there is that separation there. So for those of you that are thinking, well, 10% preferred return, not super great, especially when it's gross versus net, there are options outside of that. And there are every once in a while cash cows that come up. We've got certain condos in mind. For instance, I'll just give you one small example. There's hundreds of them out here. We've got one called Destin West here in Fort Walton Beach. It's actually on Okaloosa Island. They have these one units. Well, there's a whole stack of them in 4 different buildings. So there's technically 6, 12, 18, 24 units. It might be more than that. There might be 2 stacks in each building. Point is, they're 1 bed, 2 bath places with a garage. It's extremely hard to find because they only have so many garages in this entire building. Those suckers cash flow like crazy. They always stay rented. You never have any issue. They're on the first floor. Oh yeah, so there wouldn't be 24 because they're on the first floor. Just thinking out loud. But the point of this is, when my folks were buying, I've got a guy that purchased 2 of them at $250,000, and I think he makes 48 on one and 45 on another, right? So that definitely exceeds that 10% rule. So you do have options like that. So if you're purely looking at it for an investment, and that's a little bit different too than if you want to stay in it as well.
Something that we kind of touched on, different amenities and such, but something to avoid when it comes to amenities, for me at least, I like to avoid anything that seems like a huge liability in a house investment specifically. So like houses with pools, I avoid them like the plague. The last thing I want is to deal with a tenant falling into the pool drunk, or a child falling into the pool, something like that. Like, I just don't even want to deal with it. I know a lot of people, they actually look for pools or hot tubs whenever they go to stay someplace, but for me it's just not worth it. So I would say avoid any potential headaches that you don't want to deal with. So some people might be like, oh, I'm totally going to only get a house with a pool because I'm going to charge more for it. I'm going to put the theme over here. That's cool. Or you could be like, I'm never going to deal with the potential of a really bad day of what could happen with this. So consider what type of headache is acceptable to you when it comes to different amenities of a property.
And that goes in all sorts of different facets, not just a pool. It could be maybe you don't want to be in a really bad neighborhood, even though the rent might be good in comparison to what you're purchasing, but you don't want to have to go to that neighborhood if something were to happen, right? So take every angle into consideration, neighbors and, the area of town, the type of neighborhood, all of that, take all of that and put that into consideration as well.
I think that pretty much sums up our ideas of what to avoid whenever you're considering an investment property. So if you have any experience with investing in properties and maybe you made a mistake along the way, or you wish you had done something different, or maybe you're in search of an investment property now and you're wanting to make a change, or looking for something specific, go ahead and comment down below with either something that you want to avoid or a mistake that you've made in the past with your investment property that you would like to avoid in the future. And
that'd be good.
We'll see you in the next one.
See you guys.